one of the fundamental axioms of astrology goes back to this apocryphal legendary character called Hermes Trismegistus, sometimes known as Thoth or Toth, an Egyptian character who, in whether he existed as a singularity, there's a different use of singularity, whether he existed as a person or not, basically is handed down to us through the mythological Hermes in Greece to the Mercury in Rome, that is the god, the mythological archetype of intellect and communication. And the Hermes Trismegistus, which really just means Mercury, the three times great. Tri Tris Megistus, a magi is basically a Zoroastrian priest because they were wise and they studied the stars. But in the Emerald Tablet, which is this alleged creation of antiquity's Hermes Trismegistus, the opening line is something that most people will have heard, and they've only typically heard the first few words of it. And that's as above, so below. And that's really one of the basic concepts of astrology. But what most people don't realize is that the Emerald Tablet goes on, and the full statement, just the first sentence, is as above, so below. The within of things is as the without of things. Now, what this means is that the above is not creating the below. As above, so below sounds like like an Aristotelian cause and effect, as above, so below. But the inside and the outside, according to Hermes Trismegistus, are not two separate things. They are one and the same. And the illusion is that there's an inside and an outside. This is the great illusion that Hindus might call Maya. It's the distraction of what we see in the three-dimensional reality around us, because that's our reality tunnel. That's what we perceive through our five senses. The fact of the matter is that the outside and the inside are one and the same. Quantum physics 101, the universe is intelligent and we are reflecting that intelligence, So I just wanted to kind of clarify that a little bit. I'm not sure that fully really answers the question. Well, but there is one other thing that I would add to this, and that is that often when people think of astrology, they think of one half of astrology, which is really all that any astrologers ever thought of up until the Italian or the Florentine Renaissance. And that is that astrology is the study of what's out there, and it's ascension oriented. It's wanting to know reality by looking at the divine proportion, looking at the heavens. In fact, the Zoroastrian temples called ziggurats were actually stepped observatories. And even the three wise men, that's a bad translation. They were magi, and a magus or a magi was a Zoroastrian priest who looked at the stars to find the meaning here on earth. And so there's this whole thing in astrology that's about, to know your chart is to know where your Mercury is, to know where Jupiter's, to know what this angle between that is, what's your rising sign. All of this is putting the reality out there. And according to Plato, that's only one half the picture, because as spirit exists out there and is ascending, Catholicism, Judaism, Tibetan Buddhism, these are all religions of ascension. They're wanting to go upward into the divine proportion. Meanwhile, you have, and that's spirit. Meanwhile, you have soul, which is the incarnation of those energies. And this isn't Rick talking. This is Rick basically talking about Plato, because to Plato, soul was where spirit becomes incarnated. And therefore, we have this basic bifurcation of what we call yang or male energy, which is logical, it's linear, it's cause and effect, it's out there, it's thinking, it's reading an alphabet and doing logic and all of that kind of stuff. which is really where astrology came from, at least in the boys' club. And I always like to mention or remind us all that astrology is basically a product of the patriarchy. It was written by guys for guys, period. So that's another topic we can come back to that's very important, because this is part of the change that astrology is going through. And it has to do with the incarnation of the planets. In other words, one of the topics that I love teaching and working with through actual real physical experience and ritual is not knowing what's up there, but it's what are the practices to bring what's up there into our reality. Because it's not just ascension, it's also descension. It's not just knowing what's out there, it's also bringing what's out there and grounding it. And soul elementally, according to Plato, and incidentally, this is also the origins of Jungian psychology, because, Jung didn't call his psychology Jungian psychology any more than Jesus called his teachings Christianity. It was, Jungian psychology, he called it analytical psychology, or his words, the psychology of four types. What were the four types? Thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting, that correspond one-to-one what Jung learned from the Greeks, fire, earth, air, water. And so now we come back to Plato, because fire and air are spirit. They're male. And I don't mean that sex male. They're yang. They're right hand, left brain. And fire and air is about this. It's about reaching upward and becoming God. Meanwhile, the earth and water, and this is with respect to your sense of the astrology as a grounding mechanism, earth and water are soul. Fire and air are spirit, and soul is like soul food or or soulful or soul music. It involves physicality. Fire and air is hot and dry and intellectual. That's spirit, and soul is down and dirty, and it's where the river meets the ocean. It's in the United States, Louisiana being at the end of where the Mississippi River feeds into the ocean, into the Gulf of Mexico. That's where jazz arose. That's where soul came from. I mean, the concept of soul, at least in the United States, there's this song called "Beat Your Feet on the Mississippi Mud." It's dirty and down and wet and human and physical and complicated, and it's yin. And it's inward. So part of what people don't realize about astrology is that there's a two-way street. And the person who actually brought this into the Western astrological tradition was a man named Marsilio Ficino, who most people don't know anything about. However, he was the court astrologer to 3 generations of Medicis while they were funding Leonardo da Vinci and Botticelli and Angelo Poliziano and creating what we call the Renaissance, or the Florentine Renaissance. And Marsilio Ficino was an ordained priest who was also the court astrologer, who was a bit of a magician and was given the job by the old man Cosimo Medici, who had enough wealth that he bailed out the Catholic Church. Basically, he gave Marsilio Ficino the job of taking one of Medici's prized summer villas, and he gave it to Ficino with the command of turn this into a living Platonic academy. And this is a whole complicated story. It pissed the Pope off quite a bit, because all the bishops in northern Italy were going to study with Ficino, because he was the guy who translated Plato from Greek into Latin. This was an astrologer. But he basically brought humanity into the planets, into our bodies. And it's a very important concept that even most astrologers who are kind of revamping the astrology that they're doing in light of, more freedom of choice and things of that sort, and in light of Jungian psychology and other things, they still don't understand the big reason why this is all happening.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely love this, well then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.